Department of Tourism has sent condolences to the family and friends of a British tourist who was killed in Nyanga. He's one of the 5 people who have died through violence allegedly related to the Santaco taxi shutdown in the Western Cape. Several vehicles have also been torched and about 200 criminal cases have been opened with police in connection with the shutdown. Many businesses remain closed, staff aren't able to get to work, and Santaco shut down its services after talks with the City of Cape Town and provincial government over the impounding of taxis, and those, as we've reported, broke down. There has been a wave of public violence in the city linked to the ongoing action. Santaco in the Western Cape says it will apply for an urgent interdict to get all of those impounded vehicles released. Well, what's the impact of the taxi shutdown on businesses in the Western Cape? Initial reports from many quarters, including moms and pop stores and airlines, have reported being affected either through lost revenue or even delays. Efficient Group Chief Economist Dawie Roodt joins Fullview now to discuss. Dawie, thanks so much for being with us tonight, and we really appreciate your time. So many economic fates interwoven here, from business owners, big and small, to workers who aren't going to be able to get their pay. From where you're sitting, how are you beginning to measure the impact of this?
Good evening. I think the context is very important, and the context is that the South African economy is in a really deep trouble. Of course, the Western Cape is one of those spots in South Africa that is doing relatively okay. But I'm afraid this is certainly going to have a huge impact on the Western Cape and certainly on Cape Town as well. But it really depends on how long this is going to go on. At the moment, I think that the impact is going to be quite significant. And if this goes on for some time, then I'm afraid that the image of the Western Cape as a safe investment destination in South Africa and South Africa as a safe investment destination will be tarnished even further, and it will undermine economic growth, certainly in the Western Cape eventually over time, and certainly in South Africa as well. I think it's important also to note is that the Western Cape is one of 2 so-called surplus provinces in South Africa. The other one is Gauteng, and that means that they contribute more to the national pot than what they get out of the national pot. And now with this, what we're currently seeing, what's happening in the Western Cape, this will eventually have an impact on national accounts as well. So it's not only a Western Cape story, it's a national story as well.
Very interesting that you're talking about, really deep-rooted impacts in terms of, going as far as affecting investor sentiment. And one would say, but it's only been, such a short time. How is it possible that investors are going to rethink their investments over such a short time, given that all the parties are still at the table?
No. South Africa, the last couple of years, South Africa has really lost, the image of South Africa has been tarnished quite a lot, with the exception of the Western Cape. In fact, we even have a word for that. We call it semigration in South Africa. People are moving from Gauteng, as an example, and move down to the Western Cape, because the Western Cape is seen as one of the few provinces in South Africa that is well managed. I'm afraid that many of these people moving within South Africa to the Western Cape are probably going to say, now listen, even the Western Cape is not safe anymore, and I'm going to go to another country in the world. And unfortunately, those are the real taxpayers, they are the real employers, they are the real wealth creators in South Africa. So I'm afraid South Africa has been tarnished in the last couple of years, and I'm afraid what is happening at the moment is that the Western Cape is being brushed with the same brush as well.
Well, let's talk about some of these impacts then. And I was reading a report from the Cape Chamber of Commerce, and they talked about widespread impacts. So 50% workforce impact in places like the retail motor industry, Fish SA, which is a big portion of trade and economics in the Western Cape. 80% of the workforce impacted there. That, of course, is affecting production. Hospitality, sharp declines in bookings. And I'm sure, the deaths of foreign nationals on South African soil will only worsen that situation. There was also a travel advisory the City of Cape Town was pointing to, telling people to really be careful or desist from travel. What is your expectation? I know that you've talked about investor sentiment, but what is your expectation of impact, even if the situation is amicably resolved tomorrow?
Well, there are a number of ways of trying to calculate the actual cost of this whole thing so far. The one is that you simply can add up all the burned down vehicles and all the other physical damage that was caused the last couple of days, and you can put a number to that. And if you put a number to that, you'll probably run into the hundreds of millions or perhaps even more. The second one is the lost production, and much of that can be catch up. I mean, it's possible if the factories reopen tomorrow again, then a lot of that lost production will be caught up. Unfortunately, you can't catch everything up, but we're talking probably in the region of a few billions of rands there. Keep in mind that the tax-free industry themselves are losing hundreds of millions of rands as well. And if you add all of that up, as well as the loss of potential future investments in the Western Cape, then I'm afraid we're talking about quite a significant amount of money. We're talking about really tens of billions of rands, perhaps, a lost production eventually, and over time, of course, that all adds up. And that doesn't include the real personal suffering for people that are losing their jobs, and people that can't get food on the table, and people who can't really do what they need to do in their everyday living. So this is a huge impact on the Western Cape, without a doubt.
You know, you touch on the taxi industry, and our focus has been on, as you say, impacts on other industries. But there isn't. Would you say that there's an existential threat even to the taxi industry in the Western Cape? And having had a conversation with the mayor the other day, Dawie, talking about the cost of that impounding, 7,000 a pop for each vehicle. Some taxi owners, one imagines, owns multiple vehicles. So that might be setting the city up for a second round of, of conflict with the city. In your experience, when you've seen other countries that have large and significant transport sectors and like the taxi industry, how do they get around, creating balance and cooperation?
Yeah, calling it an existential threat to the taxi industry, I think that's a bit of a strong word. I don't think so. I think the taxi industry in South Africa has been hugely successful, but I think it's important also for the taxi industry to comply with the necessary rules and regulations in the country. I think they are very important for a working and a properly functioning economy in South Africa, and certainly in the Western Cape as well. So I think the taxi industry will be here after this as well. But I think the central government should take much of the blame of what's happening at the moment in the Western Cape. Public transport is not what it's supposed to be. And it's not only the taxi industry that think that they are above the law. We've got many other industries in South Africa that are also suffering, like the construction industry are facing a so-called construction mafia. We've got the transport mafia. We've got the illegal mining mafia in South Africa. We've got the blue light brigades acting like a mafia in South Africa. So I think much of this should be blamed on central government as well. But the taxi industry is very, very important, and I would say that the taxi industry is one of those industries that have been hugely successful in South Africa. They only need to be properly regulated as well.
Dawie, thanks for stopping by and talking to us tonight. We really appreciate your time. That was Efficient Group Chief Economist Dawie Roodt just talking to us about the impact of the ongoing taxi shutdown in the Western Cape. We'll continue to watch this story. We'll take a short break and we're back straight after.